Well, we have a topic for today, which will be about near-death experiences. This topic is a highly requested one. Many people have asked about this topic throughout the years. And it's a topic, of course, that is been much in the news throughout many years already. And maybe starting in the 90s and now going all the way. I heard actually first when I was a child, I heard about this topic on the primary school when there was a teacher of religion who taught us about this. And I remember it being like an eye-opener to me, and it really changed my entire perspective on life. And so it really was very eye-opening for me that something like this really is a very widespread phenomenon. So let's just look at what we are talking about when we are using the words near-death experience, and what does Buddhism say about this? So this is a very famous researcher for near-death experiences. He's actually Dutch. His name is Pim van Lommel, and he's been doing research about NDEs, or near-death experiences. In Dutch, these days they are called nabij de dood ervaringen. The word bijna dood ervaringen is no longer used by the NDE community. And he's been doing this for over 20 years. And there are many countries there are near NDE societies, as there are in the Netherlands and Belgium, for example. And we used to invite one of those people from one of those societies to be a guest speaker in Belgium as well. But to come back to the general overview of what people think of NDEs, well, there is some interest in science, and there is a growing interest. In 2001, Pim van Lommel published a review of 344 studies about NDEs in the renowned medical journal, The Lancet. So this is quite well accepted as a phenomenon in the medical literature. But people are still in debate as to what it actually is. Is it really a phenomenon? Is it really something real? Or is it just imagination? That is what the scientists are talking about. In whatever you believe about that, it's important to note that in English-speaking countries, or even in, for example, Germany, 4 to 15% of the population have had NDEs. And if you are teaching to average size hall of people meditating, and you ask them whether anybody has had an NDE, will be somebody raising their hand. I've tested this, and it works like that. So when you are thinking about this, you are not the only person. And maybe some of you have had some experiences with NDEs. Now, NDEs are quite still, even in today's world, quite a difficult topic to talk about. Many people who've had NDEs struggle to find somebody who they can talk about this with. And that is a problem. That is a problem. Of course, there is a lot of interest from religion, from the religious corner in the religious world. For example, in Christianity, there's a lot of interest in NDEs. But even in some cases, nothing to do with religion. There is some interest from the scientific community, like in this case. But Pim van Lommel in later years has become a bit more controversial, and he's not always widely accepted in the scientific community. But still, this review was very important. Now, what he discovered in this review, and if you look at other works of other scholars about NDEs, they come to conclude that people experience 6 things when they have an NDE. First of all, they will have a life review. That means that when people die or almost die and then come back to be revived in some way through some, I mean, for those of you who do not know, an NDE is a very serious condition, usually a heart condition or some other serious condition which causes you to almost die and then somehow be resuscitated or survive the process. It can also be surgery or something like that. So in these NDEs, people experience the life review. People would see their lives passing by, which is widely known. People have been knowing this for a long time already. And then a feeling of happiness and peace as you leave your body behind. Many people who have experienced NDEs say that they really felt a great sense of peace when they left their body behind. Now, personally, I've never had an NDE, but I've talked with people about this, and they say has been very life transforming. And it doesn't end there. Some people experience seeing dark surroundings. Other people experience a tunnel of light. Can also be both. And there will be a sense of entering another dimension. Now, all of this, you might be interested to know, can also be found in the Buddhist texts. And we call these the aramana, the 3 aramana, which everybody will experience when they pass away to a less or more extent. First of all, people will experience images of their actions, kamma aramana, or in Thai, kamarom. Kamma aramana is actually basically what we call a life review in English literature, in the English surveys. So it means images of the things that you have experienced. Now, when you look at reports by people who have had NDEs, it turns out that they actually feel that there's a sort of causality in their actions, that there is a very strong relation to what they do and how the world responds. This, of course, is very logical for many Buddhists who believe strongly in the way the workings of karma. But yes, it's of course still very new for many people who have had an NDE and have not heard about these ideas. Then there are images of objects used during their actions. Now that sounds very specific, but it could also be buildings or surroundings or the people that you've been interacting with. We call this kamma nimitta aramana. It can be anybody in your surroundings. So this is also something you see. So when you have these images coming up, you will also see people or objects or places you've been. And all of this comes with certain moods, comes with certain feelings. And this will be part of this live review. And in the Buddhist text, they say that even when like an ironsmith, right? A person who's melting iron, who's working on iron objects for his profession. And he's using an anvil and a hammer, and he's hitting a hammer. He's using this hammer to hit an anvil. And by accident, by chance, he hits a mosquito or another kind of insect. According to the Buddhist text, that insect, in that very tiny moment, that 1 second when the hammer hits the anvil, that insect will still experience a near-death experience. This is what the Buddhist texts say. So this is a very timeless moment. Even if it's just 1 second, you still have this experience. It's like time just stands still, just freezes. Then the third thing is similar to the last one, number 6 and 5 and 4, is what we call in Buddhism katti nimitta aramana, meaning the images of a destination. This is the images that are connected with the place that we are about to be reborn. Now, I know this is a pretty deep topic, right? Because this is not only talking about rebirth, or if you want to call it reincarnation, be my guest. It's not only talking about rebirth, but it's also talking about different worlds and different destinations in which we can be reborn, which is quite deep and profound. So these images, they will be connected with the place that we are about to be reborn in. They are not the actual place. I have to make that clear. They may still, I think, and this is my own interpretation, but I think they may still be subject to our interpretation. Because if you are from a Hindu background, maybe you interpret it in a certain way. If you are from a Christian background, you will think everything is God. That is the way we interpret things. But the image is still pointing to the real thing. So it's not the real thing yet, but it can be. Of course, it will be in later on. This is the idea. So it's like a sort of premonition, a sort of image that will tell you what the destination will be next. So this is what we call kati nimitta aramana. So, for example, in the Buddhist text, they say that somebody, or in the Thai tradition, they say that somebody who is about to be reborn as a human being will, for example, see a sort of fetus. They will see in English it's called a fetus, right? A fetus, the beginning of the baby. They will see that already, even though they have not been reborn yet. So this is like the sort of image that is connected with that state of mind at that moment, and it points to the next step. This is all kind of scary, isn't it? Some people find that it's a little scary, or a little it's a little out there, a little deep to study about these things, but we can give it a little bit the benefit of the doubt and allow it to sink in and what it means for our lives. Basically, it comes down to 3 things. How we have lived is how we die. That is how in Buddhism we talk about these things. So very often the Buddha would say, even now, when people still live this human life, they haven't been reborn yet, we can say that some people live their human lives like devas or angels, and some people live their human lives like animals. Even now, there's still differences already. Even though we all have the same human body, we still have different lives, different ways of experiencing and dealing with our lives. And that way we live our lives is how we actually pass away. We take our lives with us to the moment we die. How we have lived is how we die, and how we die is how we are reborn. This is the next step. Or as one doctor put it, we die the life we lived. And that is a very important statement, and that is the essence to when we talk about rebirth in Buddhism and the whole process of how we are entering from one world to the next. And the Buddha, he would describe this in many ways. He would sometimes say that it's like walking from one house to the next house or something like that. He would have many metaphors explaining this process. Sometimes it's also said in the Christian tradition that when somebody dies, the silver cord is broken, like there's this sort of silver cord. And this is of course, not a real image. It's not a real photo, but it's like a sort of artistic representation of how this connection with a sort of subtle mind is going through some sort of cord. In Christianity, this is called the silver cord. In Buddhism, we don't really have a term for it in the Buddhist scriptures, as far as I'm aware. But in Thailand, sometimes we call it sai, which is like a line, or sometimes we call it kua kai, which is like a sort of a pole of the body, which is like the mind and the body connects in that way. It can be that when we dream, that line is still connecting. It's not broken yet. So when we dream, a part of us is actually traveling outside of us. But when we die, that actually disconnects. Now, many of these ideas, you might give them some doubt. That is up to you. I'm not saying you have to believe this instantly. I'm just saying I'm teaching you, I'm sharing some wisdom here. And the Buddha, he then also talks about this, how our mind is connected in this process, how our mind is part of this process. So I just said our lives is how we die. So our lives shape how we die and how we are reborn. So the Buddha actually explains this in a bit more detail when he says, when the mind is defiled, an unhappy destination may be expected. So too, when the mind is undefiled, a happy destination may be expected. So what does he mean by that? He means that there is a mind can be clouded. Whenever we do a lot of wrong things, we hurt ourselves and others, we are leading destructive lives, then our mind becomes clouded. It becomes difficult to think things through, to make the right decisions. We are led by greed or by hatred, or by perceptions that are twisted, that are turned, that are not right. So this is clouded, the clouded mind. But clear minds, some people have clear minds. They have a good heart, sharp mind. They are making the right decisions for themselves and others, taking good care of their family, of their co-workers, of their elders in their community. And then when they, with this clear mind, it connects with a happy destination. There's also discussions in Buddhist texts about worlds that are halfway in between. There's discussion about the world of Yama. Yama is the world like halfway in between. But I won't go into much detail tonight. But basically, it comes down to a process. Now, when we talk about these different worlds, right, like a happy or unhappy destination, there's a lot of images that come up, a lot of emotional responses that people have. They find it sometimes judgmental to make such judgments, or some people find that it's difficult to talk about these things. How can we even know this? But the Buddha, he said it's not something to think of as a judgment or something that is unfair or something like that. It's more like a sort of law of nature. Our mind connects with our body, our world, and the world that we enter is shaped through our mind. So in that way, we are attracting, in a way, the next life. But it's not something we can just think our way through. We cannot just think positive, and that will be it. It's through our actions, not only our thinking, that we shape our lives and our mind. So in the time of the Buddha said that sometimes when people are about to die, their relatives and their friends will pray for them to go to a good destination. Or if we use today's parlor, we might say heaven. But the Buddha said that praying in this regard does not help, because praying is just thought. It's not actually the action that shapes the mind, shapes the shapes the world, shapes our entire existence. It's the thought is part of it. Our thoughts are part of it, but it's also our actions, our words, the things that we have done throughout our lives that shape us. So he compares this with with throwing stones in the water. If they sink, they sink. But if you throw oil into a little bit of water, it will float. There's no way you can just change that. You cannot just say to those, you can start shouting to those stones, please don't. Sorry? I thought it was a question. You can say to those stones, please do not sink, but they will still sink. You can say to that oil, please don't come to the surface, but it will still come to the surface. So this is like the way we think about these things in Buddhism. It's not so much like there's some higher intelligence that is controlling this process, but it's through a sort of law of nature that is part of this world and have been part of this world and this cosmos for a long time that these things happen. Now, you might want to see that as an intelligence, that's up to you. But in Buddhism, we see it as a sort of impersonal law that exists. And it is not either fair or unfair, but it's just a thing that is part of the world that we have to know about. There's many NDEs that are very interesting, not only of adults. I mean, adults are, of course, shaped by their upbringing and the context and everything they learned about from their religion, right? But there's also stories that are known from children. Like this child, his name is Chris. He actually had an NDE because he had some serious condition, and he survived that serious condition. But when he came back to life, he said that he had an experience. He actually drew images of it, that he saw himself as a bee, like he was entering a bee, like he was in the womb of a bee. And he was traveling through flowers and grass and so on. And he had all these experiences, and he talked about that. There are many of such experiences that have been drawn by children, but of course also by adults, have been talked about. And this is very interesting. If we compare this with different countries and different cultures, you can see certain patterns. In fact, in Thailand, there have been entire talk shows about this topic, and of course also in the West. But it's still a little bit controversial, and people don't really know what to do with it. It's an interesting, but it's kind of sad that the next generation seems to be less interested in this sometimes. It seems like the interest in near-death experiences and these phenomena is actually becoming a little less these days. Maybe it's because our world is becoming more technical and more scientific, and these kind of marginal experiences are not part of the discourse anymore. That's kind of sad. But it doesn't matter. We can help each other to make people to allow more openness about these topics and allow it to be something we can talk about. Because the Buddhism never says you have to believe this, and if you don't believe this, you're stupid or you're going to hell or something like that. That's not the way Buddhism teaches. I'm not saying that other religions teach like this. I think it very much depends on who's teaching that religion. But in Buddhism, that's not how we teach the teaching of the Buddha. The Buddha, he would talk to a group of people in the Buddhist text. This is a very famous discourse, and it's called the Kalama Sutta, the teaching to the Kalamas. Now, the Kalamas, they were living on like the border of a forest. And it was like all these gurus and all these different people would come to that forest, and they would talk with all of these people, and all these different teachers would be talking to the Kalamas. And at a certain point, they just were fed up with it. Or maybe not fed up, but they kind of were full of it. Like they had so much, they were like satiated. They had so much ideas, and all of these ideas were in contrast. We're conflicting with each other, you know. So then the Buddha, he talked to those Kalamas and he said, it's okay. You are in doubt about something you can be in doubt about. That's okay. He said, it's fitting for you to be in doubt. Doubt is arising in you about a perplexing matter. You're not in doubt about whether the sun rises in the morning. You are in doubt about something you can't easily perceive. So the Kalama Sutta is a very interesting teaching. And the Buddha, he actually talks about that you don't have to too quickly come to a conclusion. You should study these things carefully, be open to it. That is also something he says, and try to discover the truth through your own experience and understanding, and really observing, but also learning from wise people. That is what he says about that. Now, some people have said that this is like a sort of charter of free inquiry, as it has been called. Like you can just go ahead and find your own truth. Now, that is a bit too simple. The Buddha, he never said, find your own truth. He didn't say, make your own truth, but he said, make the truth your own. That's not the same thing. When we use the word in the Pali language, we use the word opanaiko, which means the truth is out there, but we have to make it part of ourselves. We can't just lip sync the Buddha, you know. We have to really understand. You can't just only pay lip service to the Buddha, but we have to make it part of our entire being and experience. This is also for monks and for everybody who practices some part or of Buddhism. Even in meditation, we have to really try it out, right? So this is an important note that I would like to make. So when this is from our deputy abbot in Thailand, he would sometimes say, if you never doubt, you are gullible. You believe things too easily. But if you doubt everything, then you're stubborn. Sometimes it's good to doubt things and to look for answers, but you have to find the middle way. So this is the middle way, you could say, in the Buddhist teachings. I'm not talking about the middle way which the Buddha taught on his first teaching, but I'm talking about a sort of path that leads to wisdom. This is sometimes called the path of wisdom, or the teachings on wisdom in Buddhism, or the Abhidhamma. And the first one is we try to find wise sources of our information. This is a good process. Like you're learning from this talk. I hope you're learning something from it. And then you gain this knowledge. You can use it in your daily lives. You associate with wise people. It can be good books with wise wisdom. If, for example, you study about whether there is something like a near-death experience or whether something like an afterlife, then we can learn this from wise books or wise people around us. And then you use this, you start to really look at it. What is it about? This is listening or reading, really trying to understand it. The Buddha uses the word good Dhamma. Good Dhamma can be spiritual wisdom that is helping us to lead a good life. And then the wise attention, the why. We have to ask ourselves the why as well. Why did the Buddha teach these things? Or why is there such a thing, or this or that? We have to ask ourselves these questions. And then we finally, when we understood it, we tested it, these convictions had become part of us, then you start to live it and you can actually test it even more. When you keep these ideas in your mind, you can check it. You can see if it's true, if it feels true. Like when you do something good in your life, you start to make some changes in your life. You start to communicate with people differently. Maybe you give some more encouragement to your family or your coworkers. Maybe you start talking in a different way. You start making certain changes in your life, making more responsibility, letting go of bad habits. And then at a certain point, you start to notice, oh, this is changing things for me. This is helping me. And then you can think for yourself, maybe there's some truth in this, and maybe this truth will not only help me in this life, but also in the next. You can make these conclusions, you can test it, and you can make the truth your own. This is much more worth than any article of faith or any theoretical expression of faith. This is actually learned experience. We are actually testing things and making it part of our lives. A few years back, there was a report by I think it was the Pew Research in America. This is like a big research agency. I think it's in America. And they came to the conclusion this religion will become less because of the growth of the decline of the population of that religion. And that religion will become bigger and bigger because of the growth of the population of that religion. And then they came to a prediction of how in the future religions would develop. Now, I looked at that research and I thought, that is just so stupid. That is just so silly. Because a religion, you can never just define it by the number of people who are saying they are that religion. A religion or any good teaching, any wisdom is what make people make their own, how you live it. It's not about what you call yourself in some sort of registration of the population or something like that, or what you say to other people that you are. It's how you live it. So I think they have to throw that report into the trash can, because that's not the future of religion. The future of religion is how we make it our own. Now, in the Netherlands, I know for a fact that many people have learned a lot, for example, about Buddhist wisdom and Buddhist meditation. Doesn't mean that they think of themselves as Buddhist or that they have some ceremony that they become Buddhist. No, but that's not the main point. The main point is how we make it part of our lives. We make it part of our DNA. That is what it's really about. The Buddha, he said, if you're not sure whether there is an afterlife, even if you're not sure, you can still be happy realizing that you're doing something good in your life. It's like a good bet. And that is not in this slide, but that's also what the Buddha said. It's like a good bet. If you don't know whether there's an afterlife destination, whether there's a place after our death, you can still do a lot of good, because at least you're happy in the present moment. You'll be happy right now. And if you know that when you do something wrong, you find no purity, no happiness, then you're still happy knowing that you do good right now. So even if you're not sure about the afterlife, it's still good to lead a positive and good and morally good and spiritually good life. But we know for a fact from the Buddhist teaching, from the Buddhist text, that the Buddha did believe in the afterlife, that he did believe that there's different worlds out there, and that the way we have lived our lives is how we pass on. These are many examples of worlds that are mentioned in the Buddhist texts. They even describe a hell in Buddhism, different hells, in fact. You can be reborn as an animal. Many Western people find that strange to think about. But you can be born as a spirit. You can be born as a human being or as a deva. These are all different experiences. Deva is similar to angels in Christianity. But these are all things you might think about, and some of them may be weird. But let me make a sort of comparison, if you like. Sometimes in the summer, we plug in our fan to give us some air, some cool air. But sometimes in the winter, we use that same plug, that same electricity socket. We use it to give ourselves some heat. We put in the electrical heater, we plug in the electrical heater, and then we find some heat. I'm just giving you an example. Sometimes things take different shapes. In this life, we are human beings, but in the future, it depends on how we live our lives right now. And then some people say, oh, I really like to be a bird. Well, make sure you really think about that, because the animal life isn't easy. There's a lot of conflict there, and there's a lot of pain there. There's a lot of fear. But the human life is actually very good. And of course, the life as a deva is perfect. But these things are all impermanent in Buddhism. They change all the time. You become this, you become that. All of these worlds we have already been born in once in our previous existences. But that perhaps is going too far for tonight. I would like to conclude for tonight that our good deeds always bring us happiness, whether there is a heaven and hell or not. The Buddha, he taught that there is such a thing as a heaven or hell or a good or a bad destination. But it's even if if you have any doubts about that, you can still conclude that it's a good life that is important to lead. So studying rebirth and the afterlife can help us find some meaning in life, can help us give some purpose, and it can even give us some strength to do the right thing. Each of our actions, words, and thoughts are important. And as one Buddhist writer put it, it's how do I say it in English? It's the good. Every good deed is important. That's how he said it, actually. Okay, that's all I would like to say for tonight.